With the release of NVIDIA's 50 series graphics cards, we've seen some of the most expensive gaming GPUs hit the market to date. But do you need to fork out for the latest and greatest if you just want a game? Today I want to look at the other end of the spectrum to see if you can put together something that can still game, but for much less than NVIDIA's asking price. So this is the collection of parts that I've put together today in order to try and build the ultra budget gaming PC. There's some new parts in here, there's some slightly dated parts here and here, and there's some quite old parts in here. This machine is going to be built around Intel's 12th generation of core processors. Primarily because this platform is only a couple years old, but parts for it are already quite inexpensive. The cheapest new motherboard that I could find for this platform was from AliExpress at 101 Australian dollars. It's an ITX board, which will help me out later. It's not bad for the money, having reinforced PCI slots, a decent array of I/O, and importantly, having the LJ1700 socket for our processor. The processor I'm going with is the i3-12100F, which I managed to pick up for only 71 Australian dollars. Being a quad-core means it's not going to be great for multi-threaded applications, but what it does have in exchange is a relatively high core clock and no internal GPU, which means we get a little bit more performance out of this CPU, and it's also a little bit more power efficient. But before going ahead with fitting the CPU, I'm going to install a 256GB NVMe drive to store all the games we're going to play. In fact, installing a CPU has never been easier, with pre-applied thermal paste on these cool new black Intel processor heatsink fan combos. It's a breeze. Again, to keep this budget PC at the budget end of the spectrum, I scoured AliExpress for a decent RAM deal. While RAM prices are always coming down, AliExpress has all of my local computer retailers beat, offering basically double the amount of RAM for the same amount of money. Okay, with our cute little computer assembled, we can now put it in the case. To do that, I'm going to use the case I was using until very recently for my Zima board based home NAS. There are comparably priced and even cheaper cases on AliExpress, but I had this left over basically, as you'll see in an upcoming video, where I decommissioned my Zima board NAS in favour of a new system. You can spend a lot on power supplies, but for this system, 450 watts is going to be more than adequate. Even for this build, the GPU is still the most expensive part in this system. But for $120 at the time of recording, it's pretty decent value for money. So after configuring the BIOS as necessary and installing Windows, we can get on to answering the real important question: will it run Crysis? Fortunately, the answer is yes, and we're able to enjoy Crysis in its full glory. With everything set to very high, we get playable frame rates. Going down to high would probably be recommended though, to bump up that number a little bit. In Counter-Strike 2, at higher settings, again we see playable frame rates. It's not crazy numbers like 400 as some professionals might require, but it is certainly playable with averages above 60 FPS. In PUBG, with high settings, we see slightly better numbers, averaging at least 80 FPS, and dipping not below 50 FPS in the 1% lows. In the racing game Assetto Corsa, I was surprised to find we get very adequate frames from this GPU, seeing averages well above 90 FPS, which is great considering my expectations were far lower. This is also with all of the settings fully maxed. In Cyberpunk 2077, we see the 1070 fall from grace a touch, struggling to maintain even 30 FPS at high settings without frame generation. But with frame generation on high settings, I was able to get an average of 40 FPS with 1% lows not below 30. A more casual racer tested on this system was Trackmania Nations Forever. As is to be expected, frame numbers were very high for this game. And the final game tested was Kerbal Space Program, which did also surprisingly well, in my opinion, with averages above 70 FPS and all graphics settings maxed. So there we go, 7 games tested on a GTX 1070 with a 12100F Intel Core i3 processor. Averaging these 7 games, we see pretty decent numbers in terms of base playability for games with this setup. Given the cost to put together this system, I think this somewhat shows the absurdity of Nvidia's pricing strategy.
So I think those results are pretty conclusive. Can you game for far, far less than what Nvidia's asking for their new GPUs? Absolutely you can. You can do it for as little as $300 odd. If you want to push this even further, LTT just released a video where they cover their $69 gaming PC, which is a pretty insane feat. But I think the numbers show that there's still a lot of life, even in the Nvidia 10 series GPUs. They were excellent value for the money then, and I think they're still excellent value for money now. You can see that I got some pretty decent frame rates, playing some old games and some new games, but pushing those settings right up there. So I think if you can get your hands on an older 10 series, if you just want to enjoy rasterized games, or a high-end 20 series if you want to enjoy some ray tracing, then that's definitely still a way to go. So I think that was a huge success. I've been able to put together a gaming PC on a very tight budget. If you enjoyed this video, please chuck us a like and subscribe if you want to see more of this kind of content in the future. And make sure you check the links in the description below if you want to check out any of these parts I've used in this build. Alright, catch you next time. Bye.